Welcome to Unsilent with your hosts Dave and Brian. This is not another current events podcast. We're digging deeper, diagnosing, and discussing what's really going on today, how we got here, and providing observations for future generations.
Welcome to Unsilent. We're Brian and Dave. Let us know where you think we got it right or where you think we completely botched it, which you can do by going to unsilentpodcast.com. You can visit us on Rumble, Facebook, other social channels. So let's get into it. Is there anything we should talk about today, Brian? Anything at all on your mind, maybe? I don't know.
Yeah, well, you know what? We would not be doing our job if we didn't talk about the Donald Trump conviction. So there was trials and still ongoing stuff, but now he actually had a conviction in New York, convicted on 34 out of 34 counts. And I got a lot of thoughts on this. Not about, I mean, there's a little bit of stuff about the legal stuff, but just like the implications and like the mood and how things have changed and interesting people that are more inclined to vote for him or be aligned with him than were before. Like there's a whole bunch of dynamics going on, but you start off like what jumps out at you, or what do you think that for Kenny G, 60 years from now, what would you want him to know about what this week has been like since the conviction?
Well, I think the biggest thing here is that something unprecedented has happened, something that changes the norms of how we treat the power structure in the United States and how we treat leadership, et cetera, in the United States in ways that make things very much worse than they've ever been before. And so if we can, well, I'm sure we'll get into some of the details of what happened, but I think to start with, this notion, we've always had this notion that we don't operate like a banana republic in which who's ever out of power gets the law thrown at them on trumped up charges on, whatever kinds of things that the competition, the opposition can think about, can bring to the table. In this case, we have the weakest of cases. We'll get into the details, but I think what it really does is it sets us up for the next step in people being prosecuted for the political beliefs after they're out of office, potentially when they're in office. So I've heard many comparisons to what other presidential candidates, other presidents that are still alive and able to be prosecuted have done while they're in office, and the notion that now we will use the court system and what they call lawfare, it's the warfare using the law, to go after our political opponents. That's a scary thing because we didn't used to do it that way. Now, a president, when he's in office, if he were to commit mass murder or he were to, kill somebody on the street, he would have been prosecuted for sure. But this kind of technical, procedural, twisting things in such a way that to get the guy you don't like, that's never been done before, not on this level. And so it sets us up for retaliatory strikes back and forth going forward. So it's a very scary thing.
Yeah. I'm not interested a whole lot in diagnosing and spending time on the legalities of it. I think that, first of all, people will look and have looked at the legalities, and I know of 0.0 people have changed their mind about anything.
Yeah, that's right. Yep, that's right.
So things that I would look at and go, this is like pretty glaring, and other folks go, yeah, of course he should have had that. Okay, so right. I'm gonna skip over that part and talk about the other more broader type things. I think that you're spot on. First of all, I'm trying to imagine how it's going to work now that this Pandora's box has been opened, where we can do this kind of litigation and people can be brought to justice after their term is over. And we've kind of pierced that veil of protection that they had. And I'm not in favor of having kings and things like that. So no. I'm not looking to make that an extreme kind of position, but we've had this kind of historical thing where on the erring on the side of abundant caution, not to present as if we're going after political enemies.
Right.
People in these have held these high positions have been more or less immune. And so now how's it going to work where, Biden leaves office and there's the 13 people who died when we left Afghanistan. Like,
Right.
There's no shortage of things with him and China and his son that are suspected to be going on.
Sure.
And anybody who's been in politics for 50 years is going to have some skeletons in the closet that are very significant. And the insider trading that happens with these folks and like
Sure.
whatever. So now how's it going to work where people leave office and the only way you could protect yourself from having that happen is to not ever leave office?
Well, yeah, and that's what happens in banana republics
That's
is
right.
is the only way to not be prosecuted is or to challenge the powerful. So the other thing that happens in
Right.
banana republics is an opposition leader will come up. So let's take a look at Russia, right? I think you and I can agree that Vladimir Putin is basically a malevolent dictator, right? So
Yeah.
probably so. And look what happened to Alexei Navalny, I think his name was, something like
Yeah.
that. So he basically was an opposition leader to Putin. He got arrested, sent to some gulag, Siberia, someplace. That's where he died. And
Yeah.
why did that happen? Was it because he broke the law and therefore he had to do all these things? Or was it because he made the dictator mad? So
Yeah. He
it's
pissed him off.
because he
Yeah.
opposed the dictator.
Right.
Now, and so, and the point of it is this. So you mentioned some things about, well, when Biden pulled the troops out of Afghanistan or, some of these other things, those could be potentially legitimate things to say, well, this was wrong. We got to prosecute him for. But in the Russia situation, and I would argue in this situation here, what's being done has no connection to reality. So I've heard it said this way. I don't remember how many, but there's a whole lot of counties in the United States, and there's a whole lot of counties where they like Trump better than they like Biden. So after
Yeah.
Biden leaves office, if Biden ever went into those counties, if he ever made a phone call to those counties, if he ever had any interaction in his 832-year long career in those counties, they could haul him up on charges, get a grand
Yeah.
jury, and come up. It doesn't matter if there's any connection to reality. And so I
Right.
agree with that. I don't want to get into diagnose all the individual details, except I do want to say that when you're in this position, then there is no connection. You don't have to have a connection to reality to come up with charges, to find a sympathetic jury who's going to say, well, we don't like, you know, Obama. We don't like Hillary Clinton. We don't like, pick your person, pick somebody on the right, pick somebody on the left. It doesn't matter. We're going to prosecute them because we don't like them. And all we have to do is get 12 people to agree with us. That's not going to be hard
Yeah.
throughout the entire country for any individual. Not only that, it's not going to be hard for a prosecutor to find somebody of a lesser stature, of a governor, a senator, a
Yeah.
dog catcher in Tacoma.
School board.
If you
Yeah.
don't like them,
Yeah.
you can go after them. That's a very
Right.
dangerous place
Yeah.
to
So
be because it's not connected to reality.
yeah, it's been interesting. I think never has there been a better illustration of people having one set of standards for their tribe based on intent and a different set of standard for the other tribe based on outcomes. I think this is
Right.
about as good as illustration of that as you can have. You and I have talked about that a lot before. I
Yep.
It's so interesting just watching TV and listening to podcasts and watching different, things on the internet, whatever, interactions where people who are adamant that he needed to go to jail oscillate between morality and legality. Like when they have to answer questions on the legal front, like what is the specific law he was convicted of, and they can't answer that, they oscillate over to the morality side. Well, of course he should be prosecuted. Like you don't want a guy getting
Right.
away with this stuff. Like it's election
Right.
interference. Okay, well, what
Right.
specifically did he do? Well, it's a jury of his peers found him. I mean, they oscillate all that. So it's a great illustration of moving the line of what is good and bad based on which tribe it is. The other thing that, like you said, I don't know about you. For me, I'll kind of talk about what my thoughts were personally, and then kind of what I saw other folks around me kind of do. And I say around me, I don't mean like in my house. I mean just like in my circle online and things like that. But
Right.
for me, it was equal parts. I kind of figured this was going to happen, and holy shit, I can't believe they actually did it. Like at
Yeah.
the same
Yeah.
time, there was
Exactly.
those two thoughts. Like, yeah, it was looking like it was going to go this way, but I honestly, I can't believe they actually did it because we've always had the ability to say, yeah, but yeah, our country's jacked up. Yeah, our country's messed up. but we don't do things these other countries do. We talk in hyperbole, and we're going to become a banana republic, and all these things happen. We're heading down the bad road, but we've never actually done those kinds of things. And now
Right.
that's gone. And like it, like the
Yeah.
first domino potentially of going down that slippery slope
Yeah.
has fallen. And there's no indication that this is the end of the pendulum. This it's every indication
Yeah.
is the beginning of the pendulum moving into areas that have previously been forbidden, that are now just kind of okay because we have this extreme tribalism and stuff. And so that's kind of how I felt about it. Was just like those two things happening at once. And then what I noticed was resignation, like people going, oh, we're actually here now. Like, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like,
Right. Yeah.
not everyone. There's tons of folks who are just like, yeah, good thing I didn't want that guy on the ballot anyway. There's no, 50% of the population is still
Sure.
doing that, I'm sure.
Sure.
For the other 50%, though, I think there was a change in perception for folks, because this was a line that we could clearly say we've never done this kind of thing, that now we're doing this kind of thing. There was this kind of, for the next 48 hours or so after, it did feel to me like people were just like, okay, so like we're really in this spot. Like I thought we
Yeah.
were there, and it felt like we were going in a bad way, but no, like we're in it now. Like we're
Yeah.
in the spot now that we've been dreading. Does that feel like that to you, or am I overstating that?
No, 100%. No, it feels 100% like that. It feels like, there's that notion that, well, it's not a conspiracy until it actually happens, right? Or
Right.
or it is a conspiracy until it actually happens. And the other notion being what we've talked about, you've said it a number of times on our podcast, and that is the feeling that among normal people, not partisans, but normal people, oh, they wouldn't go that far.
Right. They
That's
would
not a
never do
line.
that.
They'd never
Yeah.
do that. That's not a line they'd cross. And the line that they've crossed is far enough so that I think a lot of people are like, wow, well, so the next, you said the next shoe to drop, what is the next shoe to drop? What is the next standard? Last week we talked about the standards and norms of language, the changing norms, and we've talked a lot about different changing norms over the course, but the here's a changing norm that is so significant that it opens the door to the next changing
Right.
norm. And what is it? And so I think the
Yeah.
message for Kenny G is we talk about how we want to think about how it feels to go through this moment, and telling Kenny G in the future, when it starts to feel like this, you're going to be at kind of the same, you've come around to this same point on the roadmap of society that we're at
Right.
right now. Well, what it feels like is disbelief, is unraveling, is how can these people even look themselves in the eye, in the mirror, and and how can people be so deluded that they believe that this is it? We got the guy. We're going to go back to norms now. No, we're not going to go back to norms. There's no norms. This norm is gone.
No.
And if and immediately, so there's lots of stuff about Trump I don't like.
Yeah.
I don't like, I could make
His
a litany.
haircut for first. I mean, first off, that
Well,
haircut. I mean, come on,
yeah, the
dude.
haircut, the orange thing, lots of stuff about him I don't like. But my
I
immediate,
probably wouldn't go have beers with the guy on a regular basis. Maybe I would.
no,
I don't know.
he wouldn't be in my friends group. I don't suspect, because we don't share a lot in common. Um, but immediately, all of the stuff that I don't like about him instantly vanished. And my thought was, and he said it, I mean, again, I don't like the way he talks most of the time, but he said,
Yeah.
if they can come after me, if they can do it to me, what can they do to you?
Yeah.
And,
And he's not
and
wrong.
no, he's completely right. And the reaction of so many people. So that I think the calculus on those that use this to try and get him, is that, well, the other side won't do this to us, or either that, or they're so deluded, they're so completely, full of themselves, and they hate the guy so much that they don't think it's even possible for those same exact standards to be applied to their person, their side, their guy. When in reality, you can concoct anything if you can get 12 people to agree with you. And so therefore we do end up in a tit for tat back and forth. We'll get your guy, you get our guy. And that is the collapse of a rule by law constitutional society. So I
Yeah.
think that's where we're at. And I think for Kenny G, when you find yourself in a place where previously unquestioned sort of standards, not even, I mean, even if you could make a legal case, I've heard the legal cases, but even if you can make a legal case for this whole thing, that's not the point. The point is that it's a complete departure from every standard that has previously existed in what you're going to do. And it is obviously election interference. There's no question
Yeah.
that it's election interference.
Yeah. Well, that's what you and I would say. The other half of the population, the other 50% would say they're saving the integrity of the office and all this
Sure,
kind
they're
of stuff.
defending democracy. They're defending
Yeah, yeah,
democracy.
defending democracy. Yeah. And the only other thing I would add to like what the perception I had of like the feeling out in the zeitgeist the next
Right.
48 hours. So there's this kind of resignation. There's all the things you're talking about, but then there was this like loss of hope. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it felt like, okay, they're not really going to do it. It's going to be a bunch of showboating, but they're going to come to their senses.
Right.
And then when we realize, or the people I just like watching interactions and dialogue online and like things that people are saying and whatever, it's like there was a it just felt there was loss of hope for me. What I really find I think the most fascinating in kind of a weirdly, maybe this is like a positive thing in a weird way. Um, I find the most, I think out of all this stuff, I find the most fascinating is as he goes through these trials, literally, and tribulations, um, his popularity is rising,
Yeah.
specifically among black men,
Yeah.
which now he's been painted as a racist now for going on 9 years,
Yes.
maybe longer, but for sure since he came down the escalator in 2015.
Yep.
So like almost 9 years now, he's been cast as this racist. Now, simultaneously, they've been telling black people that this man hates you and he's a racist, and also the U.S. is racist. We were built on racist principles, like everything's racist.
Yeah.
Um, I heard last week that dieting is racist, so like we got that going for us now. That's a
Oh,
that's a new one we can add to the is it a racism or a climate change problem? We can add dieting to the racist column, so we got that going.
well, I don't
Um,
diet, so I'm safe.
so see, right. So simultaneously, we've been telling everybody that Trump is a racist and black people that they're in a racist country and like everybody's out to get them. And we cite things like the Jim Crow era. And okay, so I'm like imagining 1942 Mississippi probably wasn't ideal time to be a black man. I'm gonna
No,
guess, right?
no.
Okay, so could you have a situation in 1942 Mississippi or even 1982 Mississippi, perhaps, where a black man being put on trial would the judge would be against this guy and give the jury instructions, for example, like, hey, you don't even have to agree on what the crime
Right.
is. You just say that there was a predicate crime, and then we can
Yeah.
get victim on these other things. Now, if you told that story to someone who went to Harvard or Yale Law School and said this happened to a black man in 1982 and he was wrongfully
Right.
convicted and he's been on death row, there'd be no shortage of like, this is what we're talking about. Like, this is how
Yep.
I told you that we were racist, and this is the kind of shenanigans they'd be up to.
Yep.
And then they do the exact same thing to Trump. And the people they've been telling who are victimized by the system go, yeah, that's what it's like to be victimized by the system. That's our guy. They're doing to him what they did to us.
Right.
And they're
Right.
missing the point where all these connections are being made. Like they've crafted this perfect story. They being like the MSNBCs of the world and CNNs of
Sure.
the world and like the
Sure.
hard left partisan folks. Like they've concocted this perfect situation where they tell these people that the system is doing these things to you because of your race, and here's what it's like. And then they do it to a guy who says, I'm just here to stop him from doing it to you. And this connection is happening and somehow they're not seeing it. It's so
Yeah.
fascinating for me to watch how the male black populace that usually does not vote Republican,
Yeah.
it's not 70% are voting for him, but they're we played the video a couple weeks ago of the spoof rap video
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
Biden.
Yeah.
The one of the founding members of the Black Panthers came out and uh, uh, announced his support for Trump and said he's
Yeah.
like one of us. That happened like yesterday, or the day before.
Yeah.
I find that part to be absolutely fascinating.
Well, the entire narrative of the left has been it's unfair. It's unfair. And
Yeah,
and as a result of that, and that's really, I believe, coming back to bite them right now,
yeah,
because I think anybody who's paying attention can look and see that what's been done to him is unfair. It's not there. There's no, I mean, no modicum of reason that you can use to get there. You have to do all sorts of legal contortions get to where they got to. And if the left has trained all of the folks that have been part of their coalition for decades that America's unfair and all these unfair things happen, there's a sensitivity to that. And Americans also, I think, more in general, not just the left, but I think in general, Americans don't like injustice. They don't like
right.
unfairness. I mean, the reason that people will oftentimes go along with dumb things or because people have been historically treated unfair. And so they'll go a little bit too far. Now, in this
Yeah,
situation, given that I think most people realize that level of unfairness that took place here, the level of obviously, twisting and contorting logic to try and get into this narrow thing
yeah,
with uh, I, I think that's coming back to bite them. Now, I know it's coming back to bite them when you have like billionaires that don't really like Trump all that much that are now on his fundraising bandwagon.
yeah,
I think it's going to come back to bite them with, I mean, they talk about suburban women and yeah, Trump's crude and he hasn't treated women right over the years. But that's a turnoff, and that's a turnoff for me too. But they also have a sense of fairness because, I'm going to get in Travis Butker, territory here or whatever his name is, because a lot of them are moms and they don't like to see, people being treated unfair as well. So I think that really
yeah.
is coming
I
back to
think
bite
that
them.
whoever's running the campaigns and whoever's calling the shots on the left side of this whole equation has drastically underestimated how much Americans inherently love the underdog.
Right. Exactly right. Because we are a nation of underdogs. We're formed that way to begin with,
I
as
mean,
an
you look
underdog
at like
nation.
what movies are the blockbuster movies of the year. It's like the Rocky movie. It's the Top Gun type movie.
Yeah.
It's the person has starts out kind of median. They go through great trials and tribulations. They become the underdog and they emerge victorious. If the
Right.
movie didn't end that way, people would like burn the theater down, right?
Exactly.
Like like I, it's bewildering to me to see how they're missing this. Like for example, not to compare Martin Luther King Jr. and Donald Trump. I don't know, maybe there's more overlap than I would think. I don't know. I've heard that the MLK wasn't quite as monogamous as some
Yeah.
might have
He
thought a
is a
preacher
ladies'
would
man.
be.
Yeah.
Anyhow, forgetting all that part, he endured many trumped up charges. No pun intended. No, what pun intended on that.
Unintended. Come on.
Um,
Give it.
he endured many trumped up charges that led to jail time.
Yep.
I think I read a story where he was going 30 miles an hour in a 25 zone and he got put in jail for it. Not even a
Sure.
ticket. They put him
Sure.
in jail. And these stories are only 50 years old, 60 years
Right.
old.
Right.
This isn't like they're generations gone by where it's like, mythology now. Like grandparents tell their children in Selma, Alabama, what it was like when MLK came to town
Right.
today, right?
Right.
Um, and it's again, we're not in this on this podcast to do predictions, but I would not be shocked in any way if this isn't if it isn't the catalyst or part of a catalyst that flips things back where um black voters relate more with Republicans than they do
Right.
Democrats. That flipped in the 60s or late 50s or whatever it was. um but the Republican Party was established to fight slavery.
Yes. Exactly. Right. Right.
And it was the abolition party for 100 years or whatever, and the Republican Party was the one that forced the civil rights laws to
Right.
go through and in the 60s, and all that's been lost and distorted. Where now, because of some things that happened in the 60s that we don't need to get into, there was kind of this flip that happened.
Yeah.
Do you think I'm overstating that, or does it feel like that's potentially going to happen again? Not next week, not in six
Right.
months, not in time for this election, but over the course of the next 5 to 10 years, I could totally see that happening.
Absolutely. It's a distinct possibility. I mean, it's a distinct possibility that disaffected groups or groups that have previously felt disaffected, including, Trump's getting a higher share of the Hispanic, vote and interest
Yeah.
now than most have in the past. So I think there's a good possibility of that happening, because there really has been an additional flip where you see that most of the big corporate executives used to think of them as Republicans. Now we don't think of them as Republicans anymore.
No.
They're mostly all,
No.
like rich Silicon Valley types are all Democrats. So you take a lot of different groups, black voters and others, and it's very possible that this kind of thing will pierce through. It depends on if it pierces their conscience enough so that they can say, I'm not just going to do sort of reflexive voting and reflexive following the candidates they tell me to anymore. I think it's very possible that they flip to the other side. Now, the flip side of that issue in the short term, I've heard people talking about, well, there's a percentage of, most in this country, most of the elections were so evenly divided that most of the national elections, presidential election, is decided by the independents, the folks in the middle that,
Yeah.
just don't make a decision until the last part. So
And they're picking the lesser of two evils always.
yeah, exactly. And so it's certainly conceivable that there's enough of them that are paying not quite enough attention, but just enough attention to know that he's been convicted and decide, well, I don't want to vote for a felon, so I'll vote for, a man with dementia instead of voting for a felon, the lesser of two evils. And that could flip it the other way, even though, I mean, and I don't want to predict, but talking about norms that have fallen. Imagine, if you will, that one unfairness that this unfairness actually works. Imagine that this unfairness actually keeps enough people from saying, didn't like him that much anyway. Yeah, the economy is maybe better, but with him, but I just can't bring myself to vote for a felon. Okay, I'll vote for the other guy. And imagine that second unfairness happens. And Trump loses.
Yeah.
Which I kind of don't think that's going to happen, but I'm like 55% that that's not going to happen, but it could very well happen. And if that happens, then the range of outcomes that could happen, and again, I don't want to get into predictions, are beyond responses like, well, it was stolen or whatever else. There are potential, violent outcomes that could happen as a result of that involve, and I don't advocate for that, keep your powder dry, all that stuff. But the potential outcomes of that, when this norm has fallen, when people give up on the system, when they
Yeah.
say the system is so corrupt that it could take this guy and use this shenanigans by conniving people to keep him busy in courts and to convict him of something that's bookkeeping errors that were expired. If the system is so corrupt with that, then why should I follow any other standard? That is the natural outcome. So you talked about, the first reaction is disbelief. The second reaction is kind of despair. The third reaction, what's the third reaction? It's anger. I mean,
Yeah.
there's plenty of people that got there very quickly, but the third long-term reaction could be anger on such a level that, nobody's really anticipating it.
Yeah. I think that there's a number of people who are just, and I say number, I mean, I would maybe 80% plus, who are just kind of wishing this all goes away and hoping
Yeah,
it just all, like, yeah, this is especially, uncomfortable compared to other political seasons, but I hopefully a year from now
right,
it's all water and we're moving on to other things.
right.
I think there's a substantial part of the population that's just, and maybe they're not even consciously doing it, maybe they are, but they're choosing to not let themselves get wrapped up in it.
Right.
And for some it's a conscious choice, and for some it's just kind of a they don't really care, but they never have kind of a thing. And you look at like when I would say when as those people begin to engage, they will go quickly to rage. I would
Yeah,
say that they
absolutely.
because anyhow, um, yeah. One of the things that one of the notes I had written down was we talked maybe a few months ago now about there's people who have proposed theories that like democracy only works on things like zoning laws and stuff like that. Democracy doesn't work on really big stuff.
Right.
And I do have to wonder, like, as people are cheering for this, there's 50% of the population that are cheering for this, maybe less than maybe it's 40%, but a substantial amount. I have people I know and like who are hoping that this works to keep Trump off
Oh,
the
sure.
ballot.
Sure. I
And
know a
like
number of those folks. Yeah.
and I'm like, okay, but and let's like you said earlier, let's let this play out. Like then what happens? And like, okay, so let's say that Trump doesn't get elected. And again, there's the kinds of things that happen in 2020 where, there's these accounts of, a Zuckerberg ballot box getting 19,000 ballots with 24 people on camera dropping them off. Like,
Yep.
there's the 2000 Mules, I think was the name of the
Yeah.
movie
Yeah.
that where they have video cameras of people bringing backpacks full of ballots. And there's no check and balance system on mail-in votes. And people who've long died are getting ballots still.
Right.
And like there's no shortage of examples of like things that indicate that might be some might be
Shenanigans.
some shenanigans. If people get to the point like you say where they just don't count on it, they there's only one action left. When words don't work, there's only a couple things left, and they're not awesome.
Well, and see, that's it. That's the problem is it forces the country into like a cattle kill shoot, right? So
Yeah,
the cattle can go no place but forward when it gets in those confines, and there's stimulus behind it. It can only go forward. There's more stimulus behind it. It can only go forward. And
yeah,
so the creation of that sort of spiral, you take a look at the Revolutionary War. At the first part of the Revolutionary War, or before the Revolutionary War, right? Lots of folks were ticked off about England. They were like, this guy. But, the people that were saying, well, we got to break from don't go crazy here. England, yeah, there'll be a new king someday, and Parliament, sure, they'll forget about us. They're far away. So just put your guns away, put your, all that stuff away. You don't need to worry about that. But eventually, folks in that era and in other eras get to a place where you have no choice. You've just been pushed down this path so far that you're like, I feel like I'm stuck, and I'm going to lose the country either way. Now, what
yeah,
do you? I mean, that's an insanely dangerous place to be. I mean, that's the Civil
yeah,
War. Look how the Civil War started with. I mean, an attack, just a small attack that blew the
yeah,
entire nation up. It took the underlying rage and
yeah.
lit it on fire.
Well, if you look at like the most gruesome, deadly, savage, kind of kerfuffles throughout history is like slave revolts.
Sure, absolutely.
When you have nothing to lose
Yeah, when you have nothing to
and you
lose.
only have one way to get your message across, like
Yep.
things get gnarly pretty fast. But speaking of which, one of the things that has been like for 3.5 years now, been just like pounded into people's skulls is the most dangerous section of the country now is white nationalists and
Right.
and
Yes, exactly.
Christian nationalists and like the white
Yeah.
Christian nationalists, and these are the most dangerous people in the world. And part of the story is that white Christian nationalists like Trump is like their demigod kind of a thing.
Right,
Like they're
right,
just
yeah.
like they're so blinded by his charisma and lies that
Right.
like he's sucked these people in, they'll do anything for him. They're the most dangerous people in the country. How many riots were there after the announcement of the conviction?
Turns out I must have missed it. I didn't see it. I
Yeah,
didn't see any riots.
yeah. Didn't see any rioting. And
No,
and again, I'm not a big fan of whataboutism, but
no.
uh, what if what if it would have been somebody like Al Sharpton or something like that, or into whatever pundit you want, or
Yeah.
big name Obama. I mean, gosh, can you imagine if it was Obama? Holy
Oh, yeah.
smokes! I mean, like the country would just literally be like melting.
Right.
Steel would be melting from all the fires that
Right.
were lit. And I think it's interesting to note again, if by chance 60 years from now, guys like me and you are looked upon as, thank God we don't have any of those people around anymore, because however things turn out, guys like you and I just evolution takes over, so to speak.
Right.
Um, I think it's important to note there was no riots on this thing where people are full of despair.
Yeah.
They've lost hope.
Yep.
They're angry. There's resignation. Like, holy crap, we're like really in this thing, and not a single riot that I know of.
Yeah.
Not anything notable for sure. Um, I think that's important, and I think that whether people are conscious of it or not, I think that it helps unwind some of those stories of the white Christian nationalists being the worst
Sure.
people in the
Sure.
population. Like,
Yeah.
if you wanted something to get pissed off about and go light fires, this was your thing. There's no question that this was a thing that would have
Absolutely.
been a catalyst for something like that
Sure.
if they were prone to that kind of behavior.
Right. Well, and I think that's part of the calculus of those that planned this. I mean, so obviously one of the things that we know about this whole thing is before he was even charged with anything, the prosecutor Bragg, who prosecuted him, said, "I'm going to find something. I'm getting into office and I'm going to get the guy. I'm going to get him." And
Again, can you imagine in 1953 Mississippi that happening, and that story
sure.
not being told today as an example of how racist that, I mean, it's
Absolutely.
crazy.
Absolutely. It's completely crazy. So, but if you imagine that, and you imagine, the number 3 person at Department of Justice giving up their cushy, high powered job in DC to come down to do this.
Career decision, Dave. How dare you?
Yeah. What a great career decision. I'm going to go to work for
I'm
Radio
gonna,
Shack, I
I'm
guess.
gonna give up 100 grand a year to go take a lesser job. Yeah.
But if you think about all those things, then you think, okay, well, the calculus here is it could also be what you just said, and that is that they thought, well, yeah, we're going to do this thing, and we're going to do whatever it takes to get him. Just get him. I don't care what it takes. Doesn't matter if it's right or if it's fair or if it's just.
Right.
But he's, and I believe they probably, at least some of them believe he probably is a real danger, and obviously he's crude, rude, and all that kind of stuff. But they're probably part of their calculus is, yeah, but even if those people get angry about this because we did this to this person unfairly, they're not really going to do anything about it because they just go to work and they raise their kids and they're just
They
not,
wouldn't really do that.
they wouldn't do that kind of thing. So, and that's true, but it's true to a point. There's some, at some point it's not, it is true. It's true now, but if you pile on too many more injustices and unfairnesses on top of it, then I believe their calculation will fall apart, and that will
Yeah.
be that'll be really hard. Now I mean, I would be surprised if eventually, assuming we get there, that this isn't overturned. I would be surprised about that.
Yeah. I will be shocked if it's not overturned. And on the other hand, okay, I guess we're there now. Like, it would just
Well,
be,
sure,
it would be
yeah.
the next domino.
It could very well be, and I suppose my own thought on that is that they probably know it would be overturned, will be overturned, but it doesn't matter if they keep him out of the office. If they keep him out of the White House,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter if it's overturned later because then it's too late. So but again, that destroys the standard. Destroys the standard of behavior that we all live under, that we all live by. There's law controls a certain amount of society, but standards control a much larger part of society than just straight law does. And so,
Yeah.
I think, what was it? Was it Jefferson, or I think it was Adams? I can't remember. One of them said that the Constitution was meant for moral people. It wasn't meant for any moral people. And I don't know why I don't remember who it was that said that. Anyway, so if the
I'm
standards,
calling your professor at Evergreen State and letting them know you were
they didn't
successfully
talk about that at
indoctrinated. You
Evergreen
can't
State.
remember founding fathers' names anymore.
They didn't talk about that at Evergreen State. Believe me, they've torn down all those statues
That's what
long
I'm saying.
ago.
Like
Long
they were
ago.
successful.
Yeah, those statues came down and they were replaced by Lenin.
Yeah.
But can you imagine I mean, China has a constitution. Plenty of places have laws that we would look at and say, those are pretty good laws. You can't treat people bad. You can't do all this stuff.
Yeah.
But the society doesn't behave by those laws because the powerful, and there's an unwritten code that says you don't violate our sovereignty over you. It doesn't matter what the
Yeah.
loss is. And that's where we approach.
Yeah, you and I spent weeks in a row. It seemed like where we were kind of getting even. I was worried about us being repetitive, or me being repetitive about talking about values, and I think that's what you're talking about. Is like
Yeah,
the values drive the society. The Constitution is no different than locking the door of your car.
right.
If you have I have a 71 C10 Chevy pickup. I lock the doors, but if somebody wants in that thing, they're going to get in the thing.
Yeah,
It's just
exactly.
keeping honest people honest.
Right.
It's the same thing,
Yep.
and we're seeing that now with the Constitution and how we're drifting or deviating or purposely just flat out denying that it's a good it's a good rules set of rules to live by. Um, Something else I thought was interesting is just watching again. So I described like what it was like for people I interact with or see their stuff online, and there was like this resignation and kind of a hopelessness and or a loss of hope, maybe is a better way to say it. And then there's absolute giddiness and glee
Sure.
on the other side,
Right.
and and the way that they have dehumanized him again, kind of going back to the why the black voters are leaving. Maybe I'm making too much of a leap in putting all this together, but here's kind of how I was looking at this. I'm like, even if you remember the movie Ghost of Mississippi with Gene Hackman
Oh,
about Medgar
sure.
Evers,
Yeah, I
and
remember that. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, a long time ago.
I can't remember the guy. James Woods played a guy named Byron De La Beckwith, I think was his name, who killed Medgar Evers in like 1964 or whatever it was, and like they didn't come after him for like 20 years or
Right.
25 years or whatever. And I was like, even if you took like a hardcore, like true, like real life racist who
Right.
didn't like black people to watch that movie, if if you took 100 people like that to watch that movie, 90 of them would come out of the movie rooting for the justice, like
Yeah, of
rooting for the guy to get justice,
course.
even if they were like racist, like true racist. I don't mean
Sure.
like what we talk about today. I mean like true, right? Because there's a human component. Like we just want justice and we
Yeah, we
want
want fairness
fairness.
and justice.
And so as I'm thinking through this, I'm like, people are seeing that again. You can listen to the spin all you want, you can whatever, but in your gut, like you
Right.
have to know, and they're going to flip. And people smarter than me are kind of orchestrating this, I think,
Sure.
and they have to be prepared for that eventuality. And that's the part that scares the hell out of me is they got to know there's a Fort Sumter kind of moment that could happen if they push things too far, and yet there's no indication that they're even tapping the brakes here.
I suspect that, true tribalism means that you believe in your cause so much that you think it's almost like manifest destiny. And so
Yeah,
if you believe that, it's the way that the universe is bound to unfold because we're on the right side of history, then you are going to discount things like what you're just saying. You're going to say, well, yeah, that's just people aren't going to overreact. People ultimately will come to see that, it doesn't matter how you got him. As long as you got him, it doesn't really matter.
yeah, yeah,
And he's crude anyway. And he's treated women badly. So it really doesn't matter how you get. I mean, and I believe that's what they believe. I believe that's what
yeah,
it's not important how he was gotten, but we got him, and they're
yeah,
and they're going to believe that most people. And I think the other thing about tribalism is you believe that most people are going to come enough to their senses to see you're right and they were previously
right,
wrong, that you're not going
yeah.
to believe that that could happen. I think that's really what's happening here.
Well, that would match with human history. I mean, if you look
Yeah,
at how the American Indian was treated.
yeah,
People thought we're doing them a favor by doing this.
right, yeah,
If you look at how the Philippines is like this huge Catholic country now, like and Hawaii is like this. It's got this huge Catholic and Mormon presence now, and like
sure,
again, not it's just human nature. We
yeah,
we do these things because we think it's for the best, and we dehumanize those who are anti whatever makes us feel and look righteous.
right.
Right? Those people just got to be destroyed. That's just how history has gone down, right?
And then you
And,
assume that and the problem is you overplay your hand.
yeah,
And so the question here is when is this hand overplayed? Is it overplayed now? Is it overplayed in the run up to the election? Is it overplayed in the next 3 or 4 years? I mean, when is the hand overplayed? Because those that believe that way And we all have a tendency, I mean,
Yeah.
to believe. I mean, nobody holds a whole set of beliefs that they think are wrong. I think
Well,
I'm right
you
about
and
what I
I,
believe.
the whole predicate of this podcast is that you and I are, or we
We're
think that
right.
how we view the world is correct. Yeah.
Exactly. And so nobody believes that they're wrong. So therefore, the danger is for everybody, for both sides. Fort Sumter is a perfect example. I doubt that anybody thought this was going to plunge the nation into full blown civil war. This spark, they overplayed their hand,
No.
and it can happen.
It's
See,
the awakening the sleeping dragon. I've had that
yeah,
thought, that sentence has gone through my head in the last week since we heard about the thing. Somebody somewhere has to be saying the same thing as the admiral of the Japanese Navy after Pearl
oh
Harbor.
yeah, yeah. We've opened the
I'm
sleeping
afraid we've
giant.
awakened the sleeping giant.
Yeah.
Somebody somewhere has to be going, oh crap, we went too far.
Well, and here's the problem is I think folks think in terms of large masses. So we think of 300 million, well, 300 million people aren't going to lose their mind, or 150 million people aren't going to lose their mind simultaneously. No, they're not. That's not how it works. How it
No.
works is a tiny little minor percentage lose their mind enough to be like the bee stinging the elephant, and it jumps and all hell
Yeah.
breaks loose. I mean, so
Well, we just saw with we just had a firsthand experience with COVID, how fast things can travel through a society.
yeah,
I don't think it'll be all that different. I think there'll be an epicenter, just like there was for
sure.
Sumter,
Yep.
like there was in Pearl Harbor.
Yep.
There will be an epicenter, and things will travel quickly. One last thought that I think is important to illustrate this moment again. To be super clear, I'm not hoping for bad things to happen.
No.
um, I just I'm a student of patterns, and
Right.
I don't know if it's fair to say I'm a student of history because
Sure.
I
Sure we
don't
are.
have anywhere near the historical knowledge you do, but I am a student of patterns for sure, of human behavior, no question. Um, and these things, as you know, I've talked about, like they just happen almost like it's not quite scripted, but like an improv kind of thing where people are handed like a premise and like they
Yeah.
have to act it out, but
Yep.
the premise is always very similar,
Yeah.
and it kind of feels like that, this era we're going through versus what Kenny G's going to go through, and how it was in the Depression and World War II. Is that era unraveled in the Civil War, and that era unraveled in the
Yep.
Revolutionary War, all the same, right? It feels to me like now both sides have their predicate insurrection.
Yeah.
Like both sides have the thing that they can begin to build a real case on. So on the
Sure.
left, like they look at January
January
6th of
6th.
what was it, 2021, right? That was the worst thing that happened since Pearl Harbor. We
Right.
heard that many, many times. And guys like you and I just spent an hour talking about how we've undone, hundreds of years of
Precedent.
historical of precedent.
Yep.
And it kind of feels to me like um, both sides have what they need to begin really digging in.
And that, it's interesting you mentioned that, because I've heard a number of people make that same comparison to January 6th, to the conviction that this was the real insurrection. No, this was the real insurrection. So,
Yeah,
so you end up with the same exact thing on both sides with different
right.
predicates that cause you to say the other side has to go. And that's
Yeah,
dangerous. Now, to be clear, we're
I
not calling for
still
violence. No violence.
yeah, no. I listen. I I would love it if even if it was RFK or whoever, somebody
Yeah.
came along who would like lead us out of this. I can't even tell you how I would give so much money to that person's campaign if I thought there was a person like that out there. I would really be elated if that was the case.
Yeah. I don't
Now
think
the
it is.
pragmatic side of me says it's not
No.
so likely to happen. I still think it's a three-way race. I've said this for a few years now, and I said on this podcast a couple times. I still think it's a three-way race between some kind of, civil war again, not
Yep.
like Mason Dixon line and like trenches and like I don't mean that, but something to like where things get very uncomfortable for these two sides to work it out. There's
Right.
still that scenario. I think there's increasingly more odds that the populace just gets comes to believe that the powers in DC are just anti-citizen,
Yeah.
and they kind of unite and go, wait a second, we're fighting each other. Actually, we have a lot in common. It's us and them are that
Right.
where the conflict is. And then the third one is there's some kind of outside interference.
Yeah.
Putin just said that he just called America an enemy for the first time today because Biden allowed U.S. manufactured weapons to be used by Ukraine and
Yeah.
fired into Russia,
Into
and
Russia.
so
Yeah.
that's escalating at a glorious pace, and the tensions with China are ramping right up,
Yep.
and there's this BRICS nations which are coming together, and so the third option would be that there's an outside interference like there was with Pearl
Right.
Harbor and whatever.
It unites us.
I still think those are the three front runners for how this unfolds, and
Yeah.
I today at this moment I couldn't pick which one it's going to be. I think the Trump thing almost makes it more likely that the citizens will get tired of the government and some kind of general strike or some kind of tax strike or something. That wouldn't shock me. I almost kind of hope it's more that than it is like the civil,
Well, sure.
left
Yeah.
versus right kind of like violent kind of thing. I
Yeah.
would much rather the politicians learn the lesson by, 25% of the people just saying, I'm not going to work anymore till you guys knock this shit off.
Right. Well, that's a hopeful position, Brian. It's a glass half full position. I agree with you that that's the best
Eternal
outcome.
optimist is what I am. That's right.
Well, yes, I know you're the eternal optimist. I know that. Well, it's just from on a personal motivational level. That's what I don't want my kids and my grandkids to live in a world that's torn apart like
No,
World War II or 1865, the last two crises. I don't want
no.
those things to happen. So, you know,
And especially seeing these robot dogs with machine guns just like casually walking down the street down like Detroit, New York City, and China and stuff like that. That
well,
no part
so
of that.
there's the fourth one to add into your mix of possible
Oh, yeah,
outcomes.
AI, I forgot. Yeah.
AI taking over the world. So there's
That's gonna be Kenny G's problem. That we are not gonna have time to deal with AI in the next 10 years. That's
yeah,
gonna be Kenny
probably not.
G's big
Probably
problem.
not. Yeah,
All
probably
right.
not.
Well, hey, as Dave mentioned in the beginning, we'd love to know where you think we were getting this right, where we're getting it wrong. I'm sure after this conversation, there's no shortage of people who are going to say, you guys are absolutely got no idea what the hell's going on in the
Right.
world. And that's cool. We'd love to hear your points. Go to unsilentpodcast.com. The Rumble channel has a great comment section there. We're trying to articulate to somebody 60, 70 years from now what this moment in time is like. And if you think you have a perspective Dave and I didn't represent, we'd love to hear it. It doesn't mean we're going to agree or even engage. But we'd love to hear it. And we'd love to be able to tell the whole story. Anything else, Dave?
I think that'll do it. If we're still United States next week, we'll talk again.
We'll see what kind of dominoes can fall over the next kind of week, right?
That's right.
All right. Well, until next time, this is Dave and Brian signing off.
See you next week.
Do you want to be unsilent? Make your voice heard on our social media channels and share where you think we got it right or wrong. Go to unsilentpodcast.com for social links so you can join the discussion.